That's the Bible reading for us, y'all. Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, 6 p.m., and it's time for our Bible study. Um, it's time for us to spend some more time with our ancestors. This week, I wanted to go backwards, and I had started gathering information about the things that we had learned or should have learned from our ancestors, starting all the way back to the beginning with the man and the woman in the garden, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. But I stopped today and thought, well, I should finish Jacob's story before we go backwards. So I would like to get to Joseph's story before we go back, and then we'll look at our ancestors. And I'm gonna tell you, in my study Bible, in the midst of all the scriptures, it does a um, kind of a character study of each one of the people in scripture at that point, and I found myself relating to one that I didn't even give a thought. So I think it's good for us to look at them and then see what traits we picked up from our ancestors, because we are they. Uh, there's nothing they did that we haven't done. Some of us may relate to one more than the other, but their character traits are the same traits that we carry. Some of the same stuff that they did, we do or have done. So I want to go back and be able to relate to them in that way. Like, who do you see yourself as? I was surprised by the one that I related to most, and I suspect you will be too. So we're still at Jacob and Jacob's story. Jacob, the um, deceiver, the trickster, the one who stole his brother's birthright, the one who bought his brother's birthright as the firstborn, and the one who stole his blessing. On the run, he has made it to his uncle Laban, where he was headed, and at the point he becomes he's in Laban, his uncle's household. He falls in love with Rachel, and he works 7 years to be able to marry her. And his trickster uncle Laban, instead of giving him Rachel on the wedding night, gave him Jacob Leah. Leah was the one with no sparkle in her eyes, and according to scripture, Rachel was beautiful and had a nice figure. So he wanted Rachel, but he had worked 7 years to get her, and instead of getting her, he ended up with Leah. But Laban said, "Just work with me another 7 years, and I'll give you Rachel too." So he ends up with both. Hi, Debbie. He ends up with both he ends up with both Debbie and he ends up with both Rachel and Leah. Leah was able to have many children for him. She had 6 sons for him. Um, Rachel was not able to have children, and um, when she did get pregnant, she bore um, one son for him, and then later bore another one, and we're going to get to that son's birth in this reading. But Um, God blessed Leah with children because she wasn't loved, and eventually they both, Rachel and Leah, gave Jacob their maids, their servants as well to have children. So in all, Jacob has 12 children with these four women. We're starting in chapter 31. Yes, chapter 31 today. Before we go to chapter 31, though, I want to remind us of what happened when Jacob started out on this journey to his uncle's house and how God met him when he stopped to rest that night. He met him in a dream and told him that he was his who told him who he was and told him that he would be with him, he would protect him, and also told him that he would um, like his son. He told him his your descendants will be as numerous as the dust of the earth. So he's given Jacob the same blessing that Abraham had and the same blessing that Isaac had. Now Jacob has it. And even though Jacob has done this lying, this stealing, and um, running away, it did not take that blessing away. And initially, it was because of the promise that God made to his father, his grandfather, and his father. But eventually, God becomes Jacob's God. And that's where we see this happening in this week's reading. So, Jacob now has worked for Laban 20 years. He worked 7 years for Rachel, and got Leah, and then worked another 7 years for Rachel. So that's 14 years. And then he worked another 6 years in order to have his own property, in order to take care of his own family. Um, and Laban was a trickster. So Laban tricked him several times. In this, you know what? I think I'm gonna, yeah, I'm gonna start at 30. This might be backtracking a little bit, but I think it's worth it to get, the full context of what's happening today in our reading. So 30 says, well, I didn't save it today. I only saved 31. So I'm going to read it from my Bible. Um, 30 says, when Rachel saw that she wasn't having any children for Jacob, she became jealous of her sister. She pled with Jacob, give me children or I'll die. Then Jacob became furious with Rachel. Am I God? He asked. He's the one who has kept you from having children. Then Rachel told her, take my maid, Bilhah, and sleep with her. She will bear children for me. The same mistake their grandparents had made, right? Uh, Jacob's grandparents. Um, she will have children for me, and through her I can have a family too. So Rachel gave her servant Bilhah to Jacob as a wife, and he slept with her. Bilhah became pregnant and presented him with a son. Rachel named him Dan, for she said, God has vindicated me. What a thought. God would have nothing to do with that kind of thing. Although he allowed it to happen, this wasn't God's doing. This was her doing. Um, then Bilhah became pregnant again and gave Jacob a second son. Rachel named him Naphtali, for she said, I have struggled hard with my sister and I'm winning. Meanwhile, Leah realized she wasn't getting pregnant anymore, so she took her servant Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. Soon Zilpah presented him with a son. Leah named him Gad, for she said, how fortunate I am. Then Zilpah gave Jacob a second son, and Leah named him Asher, for she said, what joy is mine. Now the other women will celebrate me, which was Crazy thought. One day during the wheat harvest, Reuben found some mandrakes growing in the field and brought them to his mother, Leah. Rachel begged Leah, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. Mandrakes were used as a fertility drug. But Leah angrily replied, wasn't it enough that you stole my husband? Now will you steal my son's mandrakes too? Rachel answered, I will let Jacob sleep with you tonight if you give me some of the mandrakes. So that evening, as Jacob was coming home from the field, Leah went out to meet him. You must come and sleep with me tonight, she said. I paid for you. They made him uh what is a male prostitute? A gigolo? Um, I have paid for you with some mandrakes that my son found. Their son, not her son, not just her son, it was his son as well. So that night he slept with Leah, and God answered Leah's prayers. She became pregnant again and gave birth to a fifth son for Jacob. She named him Issachar, for she said, God has rewarded me for giving my servant to my husband as a wife. That was not so. Then Leah became pregnant again and gave birth to a sixth son for Jacob. She named him Zebulun, for she said, God has given me a good reward. Now my husband will treat me with respect, for I have given him six sons. Later, she gave birth to a daughter and named her Dinah. Then God remembered Rachel's plight and answered her prayers by enabling her to have children. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son. God has removed my disgrace, she said, and she named him Joseph. For she said, may the Lord add yet another son to my family. Soon after Rachel had given birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, please release me so I can go home to my own country. Let me take my wives and children, for I have earned them by serving you, and let me be on my way. You certainly know how hard I've worked for you. Please listen to me, Laban replied. I have become wealthy, for the Lord has blessed me because of you. Laban knew it wasn't him. Laban knew it was because of Jacob that he had grown wealthy, and he was wealthy. Um, 28 says, tell me how much I owe you. Whatever it is, I'll pay it. Jacob replied, you know how hard I've worked for you, and how your and herds have grown under my care. You had little indeed before I came, but your wealth has increased enormously. The Lord has blessed you through everything I've done. But now, what about me? When can I start providing for my own family? What wages do you want? Laban asked again. Jacob replied, don't give me anything. Just do this one thing, and I'll continue to tend and watch over your flocks. Let me inspect the flocks today and remove all the sheep and goats that were speckled or spotted, along with all the black sheep. Give these to me as my wages. In the future, when you check the animals you have given me as my wages, you'll see that I have been honest. Imagine that. He's bringing a point to Laban, who is a trickster, that the fact that the sheep that he'll have will be speckled and striped and black would prove that he's being honest. So he's making a turn, right? He's actually becoming closer to the man that God created him to be because he's concerned now about being honest. Uh, all right, Laban replied, it will be as you say. But that very day, Laban went out and removed the male goats that were streaked and Spotted and all the black sheep. So Laban ain't concerned about being honest. He placed them in the care of his sons, who took them 3 days' journey from where Jacob was. Meanwhile, Jacob stayed and cared for the rest of Laban's flock. When Jacob took some fresh branches of poplar, almond, and plane trees, and peeled off the strips of bark, making white streaks on them. Mhm. Then he placed these peeled branches in the watering troughs where the flocks came to drink, for that was where they made it. And when they made it in front of the white streaked branches, they gave birth to young that were streaked, speckled, and spotted. No, that wasn't because of the branches. That was just God blessing him. Still, we have Laban saying, "Everything I have is because God has blessed you. He's been with you." And as soon as that is stated, and Jacob says the same thing, that all of this is because of how I worked for you. In the next move, he does something that would allow him to grow his flock by going to get a branch from a tree when he already got a God who said, "I'm going to do this for you." Doesn't make sense, but that's what he did. Um, Jacob separated those lambs from Laban's flock, and at mating time, he turned the flock to face Laban's animals that were streaked or black. This this was how he built his own flock instead of increasing Laban's. Whenever the stronger females were ready to mate, Jacob would place the peeled branches in the watering trough in front of them. Then they would mate in front of the branches. But he didn't do this with the weaker ones, so the weaker lambs belonged to Laban and the stronger ones were Jacob's. As a result, Jacob became very wealthy, with large flocks of sheep and goats, female and male servants, and many camels and donkeys. He did all that to help himself, but God was going to bless him anyway. And God did not take those blessings away because he saw Jacob trying to do it on his own. But that's the point. We don't have to do all that striving and stuff on our own. God has a plan to bless us, and all we have to do is allow him to be God, which is what Jacob should have done. But either way, he got wealthy, and he got all these flocks, and he got male and female servants and many camels and donkeys, but it wasn't the branches and the troughs. It was God. 31. This is the start of where we haven't been now. 31. Oh, I can read up here now to be easier. Reading out of the script, out of the Bible is much harder because I can't see as well. So 31 reads, come on, 31. Just a second. Gotta get all this other stuff out the way. 31. Jacob soon learned that Laban's sons were grumbling about him. "Jacob has robbed our father of everything," they said. "He has gained all his wealth at our father's expense." And Jacob began to notice a change in Laban's attitude toward him. Then the Lord said to Jacob, "Return to the land of your father and your grandfather and your relatives, where I will be with you." Remember when he got to Bethel, the first time he got to Bethel, and he had this dream, and God said he would be with him? God told him, "I will be with you. I'm your God. I will be with you, and I will protect you." Then Jacob, in verse 20, chapter 28, this is what Jacob responded to God and his promise. It says, then Jacob made this vow. If God will indeed be with me and protect me on this journey, and if he will provide me with food and clothing, and if I return safely to my father's home, then the Lord will certainly be my God. And this memorial pillar I have set up will become a place for worshiping God, and I will present to God a tenth of everything he gives me. That was the response to God's promise that Jacob made. And God is getting ready to do exactly what he wanted him to do, return him back. Well, he's already protected him. He's already been with him. He's protected him. He's given him the necessities of life during this 20 years. And um, now God is telling him to go back home. Go back to the land your father and your grandfather of your father and your grandfather, to your relatives there, and I will be with you. That's what God said. So he's on his way home. So Jacob called Rachel and Leah out to the field where he was watching his flock. He said to them, I have noticed that your father's attitude toward me has changed, but the God of my father has been with me. You see how he has faith and at the same time thinks he has to do some extra? Let's not be that Jacob. We don't have to do the extra peeling of branches and putting them in the troughs and all that extra work to get the flock that he wanted. God was with him and blessing him the entire time. But the God of my father has been with me. 6 says, you know how hard I've worked for your father, but he has cheated me, changing my wages 10 times. But God has not allowed him to do me any harm. He gives God the credit, even though he did that craziness. 4, if he said the speckled animals will be your wages, the whole flock began to produce speckled young. And when he changed his mind and said the striped animals will be your wages, then the whole flock produced striped wages, striped young. In this way, God has taken your father's animals and given them to me. One time during the mating season, I had a dream and saw that the male goats mating with the females were streaked, speckled, and spotted. Then in my dream, the angel of God said to me, Jacob? And I replied, yes, here I am. The angel said, look up, and you will see that only the streaked, speckled, and spotted males are mating with the females of your flock. For I have seen how Laban has treated you. I am the God who appeared to you at Bethel, the Bethel where we just read, where God promised to be with him, to make his descendants as numerous as the dust of the earth, where he told him, I will be with you. I won't leave you until I've given you everything I promised to give you. I will protect you. That was Bethel. And then, of course, Jacob's response was, if you take care of me and bring me back to this land, you will be my God. 13, I am the God who appeared to you at Bethel, the place where you anointed the pillar of stone and made your vow to me. Now, get ready and leave this country and return to the land of your birth. Rachel and Leah responded, that's fine with us. We won't inherit any of our father's wealth anyway. He has reduced our rights to those of foreign women. And after he sold us, he wasted the money you paid him for us. All the wealth God has given you from your father, from our father, legally belongs to us and our children. So go ahead and do whatever God has told you. So Jacob put his wives and children on camels, and he drove all his livestock in front of him. He packed all the belongings he had acquired in Pandanaram and set out for the land of Canaan, where his father Isaac lived. At that time they left Laban. At the time, at the time they left Laban was some distant. Dang, I can't read. At the time they left, Laban was some distance away, shearing his sheep. Rachel, listen to this. Rachel stole her father's household idols and took them with her. So she just heard all that Jacob said that his God, the father of his God, the God of his father and his grandfather had done for him, therefore them. And before she leaves her father's house, she steals the fake gods, the idols. Okay. Anyway, Jacob outwitted Laban the Aramean, for they set out secretly and never told Laban they were leaving. So Jacob took all his possessions with him and crossed the Euphrates River, heading for the hill country of Gilead. 3 days later, Laban was told that Jacob had fled. So he gathered a group of his relatives and set out in hot pursuit. He caught up with Jacob 7 days later in the hill country of Gilead. But the previous night, God had appeared to Laban the Aramean in a dream and told him, I'm warning you, leave Jacob alone. Isn't that amazing? Leave Jacob alone. 25. Laban caught up with Jacob as he was camped in the hill country of Gilead, and he set up his camp not far from Jacob's. What do you mean by deceiving me like this? The deceiver, both are deceivers, but the deceiver who deceived Jacob wants to know that why you deceive me like this. So he recognized deception, and he also knows he's a deceiver, but he want to know why Jacob deceived him. Laban demanded, how dare you drag my daughters away like prisoners of war? Why did you slip away secretly? Why did you deceive me? And why didn't you say you wanted to leave? Well, he had already told him he wanted to leave. And Laban go through this whole thing about how wealthy he was because of him and what can I pay you and da 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 da, right? I would have given you a farewell feast with singing and music, accompanied by tamarines and harps. Why didn't you let me kiss my daughters and grandchildren and tell them goodbye? You have acted very foolishly. I could destroy you, Laban says. I could destroy you, but the God of your father appeared to me last night and warned me, leave Jacob alone. 30. I can understand your feeling that you must go and your intense longing for your father's home, but why have you stolen my gods? Little g gods, because there's only one God. That is the the living God, the true and living God. This little g God is these statues that they've made to worship instead of worshiping the true and living creator of heaven and earth. But just think, this is where Abraham came from. He came from a land that worshiped idols. But God chose him to become the father of a nation that he would call his own. I love it. 31. I rushed away because I was afraid, Jacob answered. Why was he afraid? God said, I will be with you. I will protect you because he's human. That's why he was afraid. Same reason we are afraid when we're afraid. And we know that God is protecting us and he's with us. I thought you would take your daughters from me by force. But as for your gods, little g gods, see if you can find them. And let the person who has taken them die. And if you find anything else that belongs to you, identify it before all these relatives of ours, and I will give it back. But Jacob did not know that Rachel, the love of his life, had stolen the household idols. That Rachel that he worked 14 years for, in essence, was the one who stole the household gods. 33. Laban went first to Jacob's tent to search there, then into Leah's, and then the tent of the two servant wives, but he found nothing. Finally, he went to Rachel's tent. But Rachel had taken the household idols and hidden them in her camel saddle, and now she was sitting on them. She's a trickster, too. When Laban had thoroughly searched her tent without finding them, she said to her father, please, sir, forgive me if I don't get up for you. I'm having my monthly period. So Laban continued his search, but he could not find the household idols. Lying, cheating, trick. Then Jacob became very angry and he challenged Laban, what's my crime? He demanded. What have I done wrong to make you chase after me as though I were a criminal? You have rummaged through, you have, ooh, I lost my, you have rummaged through everything I own. Now, show me what you found that belongs to you. Set it out here in front of us before our relatives for all to see. Let them judge between us. For 20 years, I have been with you, caring for your flocks, and all that time, your sheep and goats never miscarried. In all those years, I never used a single ram of yours for food. And and if any were attacked and killed by wild animals, I never showed you the carcass and asked you to reduce the count of your flock. No, I took the loss myself. You made me pay for every stolen animal, whether it was taken in broad daylight or in the dark of night. I worked for you through the scorching heat of the day and through the cold and sleepless nights. Yes, for 20 years I slaved in your house. I worked for 14 years to earn your two daughters and 6 more years for your flock, and you changed my wages 10 times. In fact, check this out. In fact, if the God of my father had not been on my side, the God of Abraham and the fearsome God of Isaac, you would have sent me away empty-handed. But God has seen your abuse and my hard work. That is why he appeared to you last night and rebuked you. Then Laban replied to Jacob, these women are my daughters, these children are my grandchildren, and these flocks are my flocks. In fact, everything you see is mine. Is it though? But what can I do now about my daughters and their children? So come, let's make a covenant. Let's make a covenant, you and I, and it will be a witness to our commitment. So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a monument. Then he told his family members, gather some stones. So they gathered stones and piled them in a heap. Then Jacob and Laban sat down beside a pile of stones to eat a covenant meal to commemorate the event. Laban called the place Jagar Sehadutha, which means witness pile in Aramaic, and Jacob called it Galid, which means witness pile in Hebrew. Then Laban declared, This pile of stones will stand as a witness to remind us of the covenant we have made today. This explains why it is called Galid, witness pile. But it is also called Mizpah, which means watchtower. For Laban said, may the Lord keep watch between us to make sure that we keep this covenant when we are out of each other's sight. If you mistreat my daughters, or if you marry other wives, God will see it, even if no one else does. He is a witness to this covenant between us. See this pile of stones, Laban continued, and see this monument I have set up between us. They stand between us as witnesses of our vows. I will never pass this pile of stones to harm you, and you must never pass these stones or this monument to harm me. I call on the God of our ancestors, the God of our grandfather Abraham, the God of my grandfather Nahor, to serve as a judge between us. So Jacob took an oath before the fearsome Lord God of his father Isaac to respect the boundary line. Then Jacob offered a sacrifice to God there on the mountain and invited everyone to a covenant feast. After they had eaten, they spent the night on the mountain. Laban got up early the next morning and he kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. Then he left and returned home. God was with Jacob every step of the way. When Jacob acknowledged it and when Jacob didn't acknowledge it. When Jacob was trying to make things happen on his own and when Jacob was trusting God. God was always with him, protecting him and leading him and making sure that he makes it back home because Canaan was the land that they were supposed to live in. Canaan was the land that God had given Abraham and had given Isaac, and now it's given Jacob. 32:1 says, as Jacob started on his way again, angels of God came to meet him. When Jacob saw them, he explained, "This is this is God's camp," and he named the place Mahanaim. Jacob sends gifts to 3. Then Jacob sent messengers ahead to his brother Esau. Remember, he ended up where he is because he was running from Esau because Esau was angry and was going to kill him as soon as their father died. So Jacob is still working on his own, you know. Then Jacob sent messengers ahead to his brother Esau, who was living in the region of Seir in the land of Edom. He told them, give this message to my brother Esau. Humble greetings from your servant Jacob. Until now, I have been living with Uncle Laban, and now I own cattle, donkeys, flocks of sheep and goats, and many servants, both men and women. I have sent these messengers to inform my Lord of my coming, hoping that you will be friendly to me. Based on the fact that Jacob stole Esau's blessing, Esau would have been the one calling Jacob my Lord. But Jacob is trying to smooth over his entrance back into his homeland. He doesn't know how Esau feels about him still. After delivering the message, the messengers returned to Jacob and reported, we met your brother Esau, and he is already on his way to meet you with an army of 400 men. Jacob was terrified. Jacob was terrified. He knew how angry Esau was when he fled to his uncle Laban. He divided his household along with the flocks and herds and camels into 2 groups. He thought, if Esau meets one group and attacks it, perhaps the other group can escape. He's still trying to take care of his own stuff. God already told him. But whatever. This is what he needed to do to feel better about what was going on. Then Jacob prayed. Then look, he had all these thoughts. He was terrified of the news that Esau was on his way with 400 men. He was terrified. So he divided his flock in half. He divided his household in half. And he thought if Esau meets one group and attacks it, perhaps the other group can escape. Then he prayed. You know how we are? Something confronts us, something's happening, and we go through panic and we think about all the things we can and cannot do or how we should handle it. Then we pray. Same as Jacob. And I don't know. Maybe you can say you're not like that. And I can say that there's been times that I haven't done that I prayed immediately. But there's also been times where I started reacting and then thought, I should pray. So then Jacob prayed to God. Then Jacob prayed, "O God of my grandfather Abraham and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, you told me, return to your own land and your relatives, and you promised me I will treat you kindly. I am not worthy of all the unfailing love and faithfulness you have shown to me, your servant. When I left home and crossed the Jordan River, I owned nothing except a walking stick. Now my household fills two large camps. O Lord, please rescue me from the hand of my brother Esau. I am afraid that he is coming to attack me along with my wives and children. But you promised me I will surely treat you kindly, and I will multiply your descendants until they become as numerous as the sands along the seashore, too many to count." This is the kind of prayer that reminds God of what he already told you, right? But it also helps us to remember what he already promised us. Jacob said, "You told me to go home, and you promised I will treat you kindly." And he also acknowledges that he's not worthy of God's unfailing love and faithfulness. He knows that he's not worthy of God doing any of this for him. And he acknowledges that to God. Then he also acknowledges that it is God who has given him everything he owned. He said, "When I left home, all I had was a walking stick. And now his household built two large camps. And he please rescue me from the hands of my brother." And he admits that I'm afraid. I'm afraid that he's coming to attack me along with all my wives and children. But you promised me. What did God promise you that you need him to keep up? Just tell him, "But Lord, you promised. You promised you would never leave me. You would never forsake me. You promised me that you would bless me. You promised me that my children and my children's children would be a part of your family. You promised me." That's not out of limits for us to say to God in prayer. He knows what he said, and he's going to do what he said. But it's also a way for us to remember what he said. 13 says, Jacob stayed where he was for the night. When he selected these, then he selected these gifts from his possessions to present to his brother Esau: 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 20 female camels and their young, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, and 10 male donkeys. He divided these animals into herds and assigned each a different servant. Then he told his servants, "Go ahead of me with the animals, but keep some distance between the herds." He gave these instructions to the men leading the first group. "When my brother Esau meets you, he will ask you, 'Whose servant are you? Where are you going? Who owns these animals?' You must reply, 'They belong to your servant Jacob, but they are a gift for his master Esau. Look, he's coming right behind us.'" Jacob gave these same instructions to the second and the third herdsman and to all who followed behind the herds. "You must say the same thing to Esau when you meet him, and be sure to say, 'Look, your servant Jacob is right behind us.'" Jacob thought, "I will try to appease him by sending gifts ahead of me. When I see him in person, perhaps he will be friendly to me." So the gifts were sent ahead while Jacob himself spent that night in the camp. During the night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives and 2 servant wives and his 11 sons and crossed Jabbok River with them. After taking them to the other side, he sent over all his possessions. This left Jacob all alone in the camp, and a man came and wrestled with him until dawn began to break. When the man saw that he would not win the match, he touched Jacob's hip and wrenched it out of his socket. Then the man said, "Let me go, for the dawn is breaking." Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." "What is your name?" the man asked. He replied, "Jacob." "Your name will no longer be Jacob," the man told him. "From now on, you will be called Israel." That's when he gets his new name. At this point, he is now a changed person. "Because you have fought with God," that was the man, that was the man, "and with men and have won." "Please tell me your name," Jacob said. "Why do you want to know my name?" the man replied. Then he blessed Jacob there. Jacob named the place Peniel, which means face of God. For he said, "I have seen God face to face, yet my life has been spared." God can't be around evil. That is why he never allowed us to see him face to face, because he would have to kill us. We're so evil. But Jacob knows that he has seen God face to face and his life has been spared. 31. The sun was rising and Jacob left Peniel, and he was limping because of the injury to his hip. Even today, the people of Israel don't eat the tendon near the hip socket because of what happened that night when the man strained the tendon of Jacob's hip. Jacob has struggled, had fought and struggled with man and God, and had won. And he was blessed. 33. Then Jacob looked up and saw Esau coming with his 400 men. So he divided his children among, listen to this. He's a changed man, but this action right here, I don't know, I have a problem with it. Maybe but this I see this as a problem. So he divided his children among Leah, Rachel, and his 2 servants. He put the servant wives and their children at the front to be the first one to face Esau. Leah and her children next, because that was the one he didn't love, but he had a lot of children, and Rachel and Joseph last. That was the love of his life, and their son. Then Jacob went on ahead. As he approached his brother, he bowed to the ground 7 times before him. Then Esau ran to meet him and embraced him, threw his arms around his neck, and kissed him, and they both wept. Then Esau, I want to go back to when Jacob blessed, when Jacob blessed, when Jacob stole Esau's blessing, right? So we know that Jacob was given the blessing of numerous descendants, and we know that when Esau got back with and ready to be blessed, that Jacob, that Isaac said, "I've already blessed your brother. I have nothing to give you." So Jacob gets the blessing, and this is when Esau cries out and cries out and cries out. Um, and says, "Bless me too, Father. Bless me. Do you only have one blessing?" 38, Esau pleaded, do you have only one blessing? Oh, my father, bless me too. Then Esau broke down and wept. Finally, his father Isaac said to him, "You will live away from the richness of the earth and away from the dew of the heaven above. You will live by your sword and you will serve your brother. But when you decide to break free, you will shake the yoke from your neck." He shook the yoke from his neck. How did he do that? He forgave his brother. When he saw his brother, listen, he says, then Jacob went on ahead. This is 3. Then Jacob went on ahead as he approached his brother, he bowed to the ground 7 times before him. All that Jacob had done to make things right when he saw Esau had nothing to do with this. Nothing. Then Esau ran to meet him and embraced him, threw his arm around his neck and kissed him, and they both wept. Then Esau looked at the women and children and asked, "Who are these people with you?" "These are the children God has graciously given me," your servant Jacob replied. Then the servant wives came forward with their children and bowed before him. Next came Leah with her children, and they bowed before him. Finally, Joseph and Rachel came before him and bowed before him. "And what were all the flocks and herds I met as I came?" Esau asked. Jacob replied, "They are gifts. They are a gift, my lord, to ensure your friendship." 9. "My brother, I have plenty," Esau answered. God had taken care of Esau. Esau was his child too. Esau also was a child of Isaac. And there was a lot of stuff that happened in their childhood that made things come out the way that they came. That sibling rivalry thing that their parents created. But 9, "My brother, I have plenty," Esau answered. "Keep what you have for yourself." But Jacob insisted, "No, if I have found favor with you, please accept these gifts from me." And what a relief to see your friendly smile. It is like seeing the face of God. It is like seeing the face. It was only God that got Esau where he is, where he could embrace his brother and kiss him and tell him, "I don't need your stuff. I've already been blessed. I have plenty." 11 says, "Please take this gift I have brought you, for God has been very gracious to me. I have more than enough." And because Jacob insisted, Esau finally accepted the gifts. "Well," Esau said, "let's be going. I will lead the way." He's ready to start a relationship with his brother. But Jacob replied, "You can see, my lord, that some of the children are very young, and the flocks and the herds have their young too. If they are driven too hard, even for one day, all the animals could die. Please, my lord, go ahead of your servant. We will follow slowly at a pace that is comfortable for us, for comfortable for the livestock and the children. I will meet you at Seir." "All right," Esau said. but at least let me assign some of my men to guide and protect you. Jacob responded, That's not necessary. It's enough that you receive me warmly, my lord. So Esau turned around and started back to Seir that same day. Jacob, on the other hand, traveled to Succoth. There he built himself a house and made shelters for his livestock. That is why the place is named Succoth, which means shelters. Later, having having traveled all the way from Pandanaram, Jacob arrived safely at the town of Shechem, in the land of Canaan. There he set up camp outside of the town. You notice that Esau wasn't in Canaan? He was outside of Canaan. I have to really check exactly where he was. Jacob bought the plot of land where he camped from the family of Hamor and the father of Shechem for 100 pieces of silver, and there he built an altar and named it El Elohi Israel. That El Elohi, we have these names that we call God, and it's all in scripture. So far, we've seen El Elohi, we've seen El Shaddai, and I can't remember the other one, but there's another one we've seen so far in scripture in Genesis. So we've gotten through the part where um, Jacob is now back in Canaan. His father has shaken the yoke off his neck in forgiveness. God has taken care of Esau just as he has taken care of Jacob. And though Jacob is the one who who carries the promise from Abraham to Isaac and then to Jacob, Esau has been blessed as well. Esau was Isaac's child too, and God took care of all of them. Jacob has learned some lessons, although he still made decisions in this traveling and in this meeting up of his brother that were borderline trickster-ish. It's like he's not a true trickster anymore, but he's trickster-ish. But he's learning. He's learning who God is, and he's becoming closer to it, to who God created him to be. And in the next week, we're almost through his story, but um, we have one more situation that he has to live through before we get to um, go back and discuss those things we've learned from all these characters. The next story we cover is it's about his daughter, and it's pretty sad, but it too is a lesson that we need to learn. Um, so next week we'll read 34 and 35, and then I'm gonna part of the time we will hopefully, prayerfully, we'll be able to go back and look at some of the characters, some of the things that happened where we saw God, where we see God in the same way in our lives, where we have learned through the same kinds of processes that they had learned who God is for ourselves. Um, but we have to get through Jacob's story before we get there. So next week, read ahead. Uh, we'll meet Dinah, which is Jacob and Leah's daughter. And she goes through a traumatic experience, and we'll get to see how the family reacts to what happens to her next week. So 34 and 35 next week, and maybe we can spend some time with maybe the man and the woman in the garden and what we've learned from their experience, um, and maybe Noah, and what we learned from his experience. I've been so blessed by studying this week, and I'm so anxious to get to it. But we need to have all the information before we start picking it apart and finding out um, who we are, and who these characters are to us, and what it means for us. Love you, Debbie, and thank you for always being here with me. Okay, so that's it for today. We will continue next week, Wednesday, in Genesis. It's a long chapter, but it's so good. And it's the basis of everything we have in the New Testament. We need to know these things. We need to see how God reacted to these people in the natural so we can know how he also acts to us in the spiritual. Okay, so have a good night. I love you guys, and we'll see you tomorrow for Good News at Noon. Bye.